Chris and I have had the opportunity to mentor and minister many people over the years. And God has put it on our hearts that it's important that we give them opportunity and a space to be able to share the radical changes, the radical transformation that has taken place in each of these individuals, in their hearts and their lives, and the wonderful ways that God is using them now. And so we started out with recording Corinne, and I encourage you to watch her videos. Meet Corinne before and after. Second, we had Erica as a guest, and I encourage you to watch these powerful videos, these powerful testimonies, because they will challenge you, they will uplift you, and they will encourage you to see that God, the Father in heaven, is here for you too. So today, it's a special pleasure. We're so happy to be able to introduce you to Bill. And Bill is going to be sharing his testimony, again, in two parts. This is part one, which is Meet Bill Before. And what we're talking about there is this is Bill's life before Jesus got a hold of him and began to restore and transform his world. And so after, we will have part two, that is Meet Bill After, where you can hear about the wonderful things that Bill is now doing in the kingdom of God. And so thank you so much, Bill. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this for us. And we just know that people are going to be blessed by your story. And so, Bill, why don't you go ahead and start out with telling us a bit about your early childhood. What was life like for you?
Okay. I'm just thankful to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm so grateful that I have a before story and an after story. It's so amazing that there is a before and after. So I love that we're doing this in two parts. So for me, as I grew up as a kid, things didn't start off all that great for me. When my first memories of being 4 years old and being in the hospital when my brother was born, and I just remember getting a phone call. My dad was on the run. He was, he was a criminal or whatever. I don't know exactly how you'd put that, but he had some issues. He had some things going on, and it was his first prison term. He got his first prison term when I was 4 years old, and I remember being in that hospital when my brother was born. And my dad was on the run, and I got that phone call for him. I can remember it was Christmas time. I can remember the present I got. It really was impactful to me because I was about to lose my dad. My life was about to be different forever changed by somebody else's choices, their bad choices. And I love my dad to death, so I'm not trying to blame him for my life because there's plenty of blame to go around. I've chose my path, but I remember being a kid and my dad going away. And it was just so impactful for me because, who wants to grow up without a dad? And that it just started this trigger of events when he went away.
And so what did that do to change your life? Did you continue to live with your mom and your brother, or what happened?
Good question. Yeah, so my brother was just a baby, and my mom, she had her own issues. Here's my dad now. She just lost her two kids' dad. He's gone. He's got years in prison. He was looking at a lot of time. He didn't end up doing that much. Luckily, it was back in the 80s where they didn't give you a bunch of time. Right now, if he was to do the same crimes, he wouldn't be getting out of prison. So that went good. But so my mom, here she is. She's got to raise two boys on her own now. And life was different. We went from, my mom didn't have like a million different boyfriends, but she had a constant one, but it was real, the relationship wasn't good. And so it was a lot of back and forth. And so we would move like constantly. And not only would we move, but we would move from Santee to National City. And so what a culture shock. You go from one place to another, and these places were polar opposites. Mm-hmm. It's not like National City and Santee are the same in any way. So I'd go from being in a school in Santee to a school in National City, and it was hard for me. It was really hard for me because I was this kid. I had this huge heart, and I just loved people, and I really did. I really had a lot of love in my heart. Just naturally, I was really sensitive and loving, and being bounced back and forth like that in different communities, things happen, and my heart was really soft, and so with that, there was a lot of pain. There was a lot of hurt. Now I lost my dad. We're going back and forth between boyfriend, and life isn't real good at home. I mean, there's fighting, there's physical altercations, there's all kinds of things going on in that home. And my mom was awesome, and I love my mom, and I'm not trying to say anything bad. She just, we all struggle. We go through stuff. And she did the best she could with what she had. But yeah, it was hard living that kind of lifestyle on a soft heart, I'll tell you that.
Do you have any memories, and I know, having worked with a lot of people, that back and forth in different schools and always being the new kid, that can be really difficult, really traumatic. And so do you have any memories from that time in school?
Yeah, I do. So, like I said, I'm this kid with a soft heart, right? And I just want to be, I was always a little bit of a rebel. I'll admit to that. So I always had a little rebellious spirit in me, but I did want to please my mom. I wanted to be a good kid. And so I do remember, I think it was first grade, and I'm walking home from school in National City, and these boys, they surrounded me in a circle, and they had a girl with them. And they told this girl to beat me up on the way home. And she was, this girl was Ronda Rousey. I'm telling you, she was just knocking me in the face. I mean, full closed fist, just punching me down, right? And I'm like in first grade. I don't know how old you are in first grade, 6, 7 years old. And I'm not hitting her back. I'm just walking, and I'm crying the whole way home. These kids are laughing, and they're making fun of me, and she's just beating me up all the way home. And it was a long walk. It probably wasn't that long, but it felt like forever. I'll tell you, when you get punched in the face, any walk is long. So when I finally get to my house, I'm crying, and my mom comes running out from the house. She sees what's going on. She chases these kids down the street, and you don't want to mess with my mom. I mean, she loves her kids, and she was willing to fight for us at any moment. So she chases these kids down the street, and she gets to me, and she goes, "Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you hit her?" And I go, "Mom, you told me never to hit a girl." So I didn't. And so that was this soft heart I had. I remember I'd get in little fights with kids in the neighborhood and stuff. And even if I won the fight, I would go home and I would cry because I didn't want to hurt anybody. I did not want to be, I felt bad. Even if I won the fight, I'd go home and I'd bawl in my bed because I was sad that I got to that point where I was hurting somebody else. And, things changed in life later. When I got older, it wasn't so much like that anymore. But when I was young, I really didn't want to hurt anyone.
And so how were you doing in school? Like, what were your grades like? Were you able to, with the back and forth and the domestic violence and so forth that was part of your home life? And it sounds like you're starting to get in fights at school. How did you do as far as your grades? Were you able to stay focused and do the work at school?
No, I wasn't good in school at all. I didn't do my work. I wouldn't do my homework. School wasn't really important to me as a kid. Like I said, I was a little bit wild, a little bit rebellious. And, with the moving back and forth, I never really got settled. And so we would start, a lot of times I would start school 2-3 weeks late. And no, I was horrible at school. And it's funny how that works. It's like a downward spiral, right? You start off bad and it just gets worse. And then you stop caring because once I started getting F's and I started like, oh, this kid's stupid. Oh, this kid, he can't do it. Oh, he's a bad kid. You start believing those things about yourself. And you're like, well, why am I even going to, nobody expects me to do anything. Nobody expects me to be able to do it. So why even try? And so school to me was just a place to go and have fun and cause trouble. And I was always doing sneaking out of class or whatever I was doing, always getting myself in trouble. I was constantly in the principal's office. And it just got worse and worse as I got older, to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something that's really important, because I know that this happens to a lot of people, and that's that the words that are spoken over you by your parents, by teachers, even by other students, other kids, begin to take root in your heart and really begin to affect your choices and your behavior to the degree that you start living it out. It becomes a self-fulfilled prophecy, because you start to believe it yourself and you start to act in accordance with whatever it is that you're being told. And so, Bill, you've mentioned clearly that you had this soft heart and this tenderness in you. So really, in truth, you weren't a bad kid, but you were being labeled and identified as a kid that was not going to cooperate and was not going to succeed. And so now, as you continue along in school, what did you do to cope with some of the feelings that you were having in that time?
All right. My coping, let's see. So when I was young, I was very against drugs. I was against smoking. I was against all of that stuff as a child, because I was taught it was wrong. And I really felt like it was wrong. I really felt like that wasn't the path that I wanted to go. So acting out in school was definitely one of the things that, one of my ways of coping. Being super rebellious and causing trouble in the neighborhood, not just at school, but anywhere I was, I started to take on this persona of, I don't care. Basically, who cares? I'm going to just do whatever I want. And I started to think it was funny to make people mad, to do the things that I wasn't, to break the rules. And, I tell a story sometimes and I'll never forget. So I'm like 12 years old, and I really got into 80s rock. I loved Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and all that. I remember I had this Motley Crue headband and it had a pentagram of all things right in the middle. And me and my buddy, we would spray our hair with the Halloween paint for your hair. And I remember putting pink in my hair. I don't even know why I'd do that, but why would I do that to my hair? Now I have no hair. But so we'd spray our hair and we would have our jeans all ripped up like we were 80s rockers. And we would just be so rebellious and just always causing trouble wherever we went, just rude to people and everything. And I'll never forget being in a Blockbuster video with my friend and overhearing a parent talk to his son in the other aisle. And that he was telling his son, you see those two kids over there? That's exactly how I don't want you to grow up to be. And both of us heard it, and I remember we were laughing about it to each other, you don't want his kid to be like us, we're too cool for his kid. But really inside, the way I felt was man, I'm a piece of crap. This is how you don't want to end up. And here I'm only 12 years old. Life ain't over yet. This isn't the finished product, but I don't understand that. And so it really hurt me inside, and I remember holding on to that, I'm really a dirtbag. People don't want their kids to be like me. I'm only 12. And so that was a little bit of a shaping moment inside my heart. I remember that, all right, so I'm a bad person. I'm not good at being good. I'm good at being bad. That's what I'm good at. I'm good at being bad. So decisions really at that point just started to get worse because I already felt like an outcast. I already felt like I couldn't live up to the world's expectations, that I couldn't be that kid. There was a lot of struggle in me with everything, and I can't blame it on what's going on around me. It was choices that I made, but it was really a struggle for me to be able to be good in school, be able to kind of go by the book. And so the further I got away from that, the more I embraced it, to tell you the truth. Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned that initially you didn't like drugs and you didn't like smoking and you were opposed to that. So here you are, 12 years old. Where are things like drugs and alcohol in your life?
Okay. Yeah, so as far as drugs and alcohol, so 12 years old, before I started doing drugs and alcohol, I remember at 12 years old, I robbed my first house. And so, I mean, that's pretty young to think about it. And here I am, we robbed this house together. Now I'm not in National City anymore. I'm living with an aunt and uncle at this point because I moved kind of from house to house. My mom it's not like my mom kicked me out. I didn't want to live there. Her boyfriend didn't like me. I didn't like him. I didn't like the chaos. I loved my mom and I still love my mom. But I moved out of there at a young age, but nobody in the family could handle me. So I'd get kicked out all the time. Like, I'd make it through one school year, and it was school really was the problem because nobody wanted me to get F's and be okay with it. People had higher expectations for me than I had. And I would get in trouble fighting at school or whatever it might be that I was doing, but I was constantly in the principal's office. I was constantly in detention. I was constantly getting suspended. If you weren't allowed to do it, no running in the halls. I'm running in the halls just because there's a sign that says you can't do it, right? That's the kind of kid I was. So we robbed this house at 12 years old, and I remember that we stole a bunch of guns, and here's 12-year-old kids running down the street with shotguns and playing like that. We didn't have any bullets in it, but just being stupid. Like, we could actually accidentally kill each other. And so we also stole a bunch of alcohol. And I remember that was like my first time actually drinking alcohol. I don't remember that I got drunk or anything. One of the guys did, and he was sick and he was puking, and it kind of made me take a step back. I'm like, man, I don't want to look like that. but it was opening a door is what it was. It was making it okay where it wasn't okay before. Now something that wasn't okay and wasn't acceptable in my mind now was an option. Now it was like, well, it's not that big a deal. My buddies are doing it. These are guys I'm really close with. And my buddies are doing it, and it's not that big a deal. And so it started to give me a mindset that, maybe it's not so bad if I have a drink. I'm already a loser. I'm already, robbing houses. You can't make it in school, and nobody wants me to live with them, and I'm getting kicked out. And that's not really how people felt. That's just how I felt that people felt about me. Every time I got kicked out, it felt like a rejection, which it wasn't. You go by the rules or you can't live here. And I couldn't go by the rules. So anyway, it started to open doors for me as far as drugs and alcohol went.
So just out of curiosity, in your group of friends, where did you fall? Were you like a pack leader, or were you more a follower at the beginning?
Well, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I would say a little bit of both. I have natural tendencies to be a leader. But obviously I wasn't leading because I didn't know where I was going. So you can't really lead anybody if you don't know where you're going. And I would say that I was a leader. Now that the more I think about it as we're talking, but I would lead people in the wrong direction. Because and if somebody else was going in the wrong direction, it wouldn't be like I wouldn't follow them. Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that. And so I was a little bit of both, but naturally tended to be a leader and not really think about where I was leading other people.
Okay. And so now your dad, all this time he's been in prison, right?
He was in prison. So he went when I was 4, and I think he did 4 or 5 years on that term. He got out. So I would have been like 8, 9, 10 years old by the time he got out. And then he constantly went back, constantly parole violation. He was involved in, some biker activity. So being in that kind of activity, what comes with the territory. So he would constantly be parole violating and then catch another beef and then do 4 years again or whatever. And I didn't really get to know my dad until he got out when I was 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so did you have any kind of father figure at that time? Was there anybody in your life that was trying to connect with you as in a fatherly way?
Yeah. No, I did. I had an uncle that I lived with that really he wanted to be a father figure to me, and he tried. And here it is, he got damaged goods, right? Here comes this long-haired kid with earrings at 12 years old, robbing houses from his house, acting a fool, getting in trouble all over the place. And I was breaking this poor man's heart. And I remember getting kicked out of school and looking at him and just him seeing the tears in his eyes as I was breaking his heart, because he was trying to be a father figure, but it was really hard. It was hard for him. It was hard for me. And so I did have a father. And my dad, just to give him some credit, my dad, even though he was locked up, his mom would take me to visit him at least once a month in prison. So I grew up in prison. I grew up going to prison. I hate prison. And people ask me, hey, you want to do prison ministries? I said, I did my prison ministries already. I'm over that. So I would go there to visit him. And so I had a relationship with my dad, the jail relationship. He wrote me letters. I got Christmas cards, calls. My dad, there was never, here's the cool thing about both my parents. There was never a doubt that I was loved. There was never a doubt. Yeah, we're imperfect. Yeah, life isn't always that great, but we love you. And we'll love you no matter what you choose to do, no matter where you go. And that love is ultimately one of the things that carried me through life, is having that love in my life. It wasn't like I had two parents that didn't love me. I had two parents that they loved me to the best of their ability. Mm-hmm. And my dad being in prison, he still loved me. And so I had a relationship with him. And yeah, to answer the question, I did have an uncle who was a father figure to me.
And so at this time in your life, where was God? Was there any talk about God or anything? Did you ever go to church? Did anyone ever introduce you to anything about God or Jesus at that time?
Yeah, so my mom was a believer. My dad grew up in Catholic school, I think. So I never heard anything from my dad about it. But from my mom, I did hear about it. And my mom's mom is she's the glue to our family on that side. She's so amazing, still is. And she brought me to church. She taught Sunday school when I was a kid. I remember all these little Bible Jesus figurines around the house, and when I was little, and playing with all her Sunday school stuff. And I believed in Jesus as a kid. I came to believe in him as a kid. I remember pounding nails. My grandpa had these long nails. They were, I don't know what you need those they were like railroad spikes or something. But so I'm like pounding them in the ground trying to kill the devil. Like, I'm going to get him in the head. Like, I knew he was a bad guy. And so there was the knowledge of God, but I didn't understand God. I didn't understand what about other people. God loved me, and I didn't get that. I mm-hmm. thought that I could never be good enough for mm-hmm. God. I thought that my decisions and the way that I acted separated me from God, which it does, but I thought it separated me in a whole different way. Like, he gave up on me, like he didn't want anything to do with me. And so there was God, but there was a disconnect because I didn't understand. I thought that in order to go to heaven, I had to be a good person. And I thought that ship was sailed. I was like, man, that ain't happening. So there was a knowledge of God, and there was a small relationship with God as a kid. But that was starting to diminish as I got older. As I chose to do worse things, he kept getting pushed back. I kept pushing him back because I'm going, well, God hates me. And this thought came into my head, just like it did where I thought, I was unacceptable to everybody. Well, if I was unacceptable to this world, I was definitely unacceptable to God. And so as I got older, I started to have a hatred towards God because I thought he hated me.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you mention your grandma, because Chris and I actually have done ministry in prison. And one of the things I would like to ask the men is whether or not they had anyone in their family that they knew was a believer, that they knew was praying for them. And I would ask them if they had a mom that was praying for them, or dad. And I would always ask them, I said, and how many of you have a praying grandma? And all of these hands went up. And I said, understand this. If you have a praying grandma, that woman has got the ear of God, and you're destiny is already moving forward, whether you know it or not. And so thank God for your praying grandma, because I am sure that part of what has happened in your life is the result of her faithfulness in prayer, because she sounds like a woman that never would have given up on you, just like God never did give up on you. And now, as things start to move forward in your life, where do drugs and alcohol become more a problem for you?
So probably about age 14. So at age 14 is really when I started to experiment with well, it starts with alcohol and pot. Those were the first two. So I'm in high school by this point, freshman in high school, and yeah, I start to want to numb the pain. I start to want to find a way out. And most of the kids that are going through the same things I'm going through they're drinking and they're smoking weed. I mean, that's what they're doing. And so I gravitated towards that. And so for age 14, yeah, I started to smoke weed. I started to drink. And again, like my whole life, things just progress out of control. It's like it's never enough. And I'm already gone this far, so what do I have to lose? I'm already doing everything I said I wouldn't do. And so, what's the big deal in doing speed? What's the big deal in doing acid? What's the big deal in eating mushrooms? What's the big deal in doing cocaine or whatever you got in front of me? I'm already deep. This is how I felt. I didn't realize I was just a baby in this. But as things progressed for me, I was always one to be like, all right, well, I'm already in. I might as well both feet in the water. Let's go. And so 14 was when I started. By the age of 15, I've run away from home. I'm doing crystal meth, and alcohol and weed still, and whatever. Actually, it got to a point that if you put it in front of me, I'd do it. I didn't care what it was. Lucky for me, I never liked needles. I had a bad situation when I was a kid, and so I was always afraid of needles. Not like deathly afraid, but I didn't want them. Still to this day, I can't look if they take my blood. I'm not looking at that. But so I never did needles. So thank God put that fear in me, and he put a block in me for that, and I never fell into doing the needles. But anything else, if you gave it to me, or if you said, I remember smoking crystal for my first time, and the guy goes, look, when you do this, don't hold it in, it will kill you. And I remember I'd hold it in as long as I could. I would hold it in as long as I could. I'm thinking, yeah, right, it'd kill me, so what? And I just didn't care. I started to really lose value for my own life. My life didn't matter. And so it got pretty bad pretty quick.
Were you able to finish high school?
No, I didn't finish. I was so, I'd just go to high school to get drugs. That was it. The drug dogs were hitting on my bag every day at school. I was constantly in trouble. Now at this point, I'm just a drug addict. I went from this rebellious kid that had some problems to a kid that has some real problems now. That everything's about drugs. It's just about getting high. It's just about getting loaded. Every day at school, that's all I'm after. And on the way to school, on the way home, during school, it didn't matter. That's what I was about. And so, no, I didn't end up finishing high school. I got to a point where I finally, I was 17 and I was 17 and I dropped out of high school.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned something there that just is kind of surprising to me. There were drug dogs at the school?
Yeah. There was drug dogs at the school. There was such a problem at the school with drugs. They started having random checks with drug dogs, and they'd come into the classrooms and they let the dogs go to your backpacks and smell them, which my backpack always smelled like drugs, even if there was nothing in there. And so they never actually caught me with any drugs because I knew to stash my drugs outside before I came in. But I was smoking weed the whole way to school, so my backpack reeks like weed. And so, yeah, they had the drug dogs there.
Mm-hmm. And so you drop out of high school. What happens next? What do you start to look to fill up the need for friends, for community? Where did you go from there?
So when I dropped out of high school, I was living with an aunt and uncle, the same uncle who was a father figure to me. And so I dropped out of high school and I went home and I'm like, I'm not going back. I'm not going back to school. And they told me, well, if you don't go to school, you can't live here. So my mom had moved to Washington with her job, and my dad's in prison. And they go, well, if you don't go to school, you can't live with us. And so I moved out, and I had a friend. He was 32, and I'm 17. I mean, put the math together. Really, I 32. When I was 32, I didn't have any 17-year-old friends. I'll tell you that. So, anyways, he had his own carpet cleaning business, and so he let me move in. He had a little trailer on his property. He let me move into his house, and here me and this guy are doing drugs together. I'm his hookup. That's basically what the relationship was in the beginning. And he's got a wife and kids, and I'm living at his house, and it's just, oh my gosh, what a mess that was. And so I moved in with him because I didn't have anywhere to go, and I'm not going back to school. But he was a nice guy in a lot of ways. We had a conversation. Well, so back up just a little bit. I remember that we were hanging out with a lot of older people. When you do drugs, a lot of times the crowd is really it's wide. There's a variety of people. Nobody cares who they're doing drugs with as long as they're doing drugs. So I remember being at this house of a friend's house, and his mom was there, and we're partying with his mom and his stepdad, and they were acting they're older, and they were acting so foolish. And I remember the mom dancing, and she's singing, and it was so embarrassing, and I don't even like to dance to begin with. And so I'm looking at her going, oh my gosh. And God I feel like it was God looking back, that there was this feeling inside of me that said, that's what you're going to end up like. You're going to end up like that. And I thought to myself, gosh, that's not how I want to end up. I got 2 left legs. This is going to be bad. So anyways, I remember thinking that. And then I was having that conversation with the guy I was living with when I went home. And he was telling me, look, you're still young. You still have a chance. That's the first time anybody told me I still had a chance, that I didn't have to stay where I was. And this is a guy I'm actually getting high with. And he's 30-something years old with his family, and he's got this dual life. And he's telling me, you know what, you still got a chance. Why don't you move up to, he goes, you could stay here, but why don't you move up to Washington with your mom? And so that was a really cool thought, because that changed some things with me. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to end up like that. That's not how I want to live my life. And so I did. I cleaned up, and I moved up to Washington, and I got a job. So I'm 17 years old. I moved up there, and being clean to me was smoking weed and drinking and nothing else. That was about as clean as it got. So I was like, yeah, I'm clean. But anyway, but now all my friends, I get this job, and I'm 17. All the guys are all over 21. So they're all going to the bar. And so they're sneaking me in, and it started a new life of drinking. And I'm not actually clean, and I'm not actually getting over any of my problems. I'm just doing it in a different way. And so I lived up in Washington for a year. I worked, I saved money, and I cleaned my act up a lot.
And what happened from there? I love how you're weaving in these little bits of how there's moments of time where God is intervening, and he's trying to get your attention, and he's trying to redirect your life, but you're not really willing to listen at that point. And so you're there in Washington living with your mom, and things are starting to improve, and what happens next?
So yeah, God was intervening. Now looking back, when I was living it, I didn't know. So at this point, I'm still drifting really far from God, just to tell you the truth. It's not like I'm getting any closer to God. I remember on the way to Washington when I was 17, or at some point, maybe it was on the way back from Washington, we were moving back. So maybe I'm 18. And my mom and my brother were getting baptized in the river, and I wouldn't even go down there. Wow. I wouldn't even go there. Everybody's going to church and family, and I wouldn't show up to church, and my mom was crying, and I broke her heart. And I could remember that to this day, and I feel bad about that, but I just didn't want God in my life. I was like, maybe that's for you guys, but not for me. And so I was really resistant to that. And so I get a little cleaned up, but things still aren't good for me mentally. I'm still a mess. and I'm just not doing acid, and I'm just not smoking crystal, and I'm drinking and I'm smoking weed. And so I moved back to San Diego, and I got to find a new identity, because my identity was before was being a drug addict. What my identity before was involved in that life, and so all my friends, everything revolved around that. So now I've got, like, I'm different. I'm not trying to live that life, so I have to find a new identity. So what ends up happening is I'm still drinking, and drugs did come back. They didn't stay gone forever, I'll tell you that right now. But they never really gripped me completely after that. And so now I'm 18 years old. I move back, and I get a job, and I need a new identity. So I start putting my identity in pride in myself, in violence. So I grew up in a violent lifestyle, right? I learned at a young age that you can handle your problems with violence. So if somebody says something you don't like, if they treat you a certain way, that you just punch them in the face. Like, I'm better than you are, and I'm not going to let you treat me that way. So I started to put my identity in the violent acts and being proud. And so you couldn't say the slightest thing to me without having a fight. And not that I was the toughest guy. I was just willing to go there because I wasn't going to be disrespected. I wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to allow that to happen anymore. So, and here I am, I'm still drinking. It's not like I'm clean. But I'm just not fully engaged in that life anymore as far as the drugs go.
Okay. And so where did you find a new identity? What kind of connections did you start to make that filled that need for you?
Right. So with violence comes a lifestyle, right? And a certain group of people. And so with that came gang type activity and life, and that's kind of what I've seen around me growing up. It's something that I swore I would never be part of. It's something I swore I never wanted anything to do with. But I said that about cigarettes. I said that about weed. I said that about alcohol. I said that about everything. And it's funny how you can feel one way when you're a kid and another way when you grow up, and you're just desensitized a little at a time. A little at a time, things would open up. Well, I'll do this, but I'll never do that. Well, next thing you know, you're doing that. Well, but I'll never do that. And it just kept growing for me. And it just, man, I'll tell you, my life didn't end up the way that I thought it was going to. Like, all these ideas as you're a kid, even though I was rebellious and even though I had these issues, I still thought that things were going to go all right for me. I still thought that I didn't think I was going to end up like that. So yeah, I started to get into a gang mentality and have a group of guys around us, and we were out there. I got to the point where I was carrying a gun everywhere I went. Everywhere I went, a pistol loaded in my waistband, because I had enemies. Because it might be that day, and you're not going to disrespect me, and you're not going to get me either. So if I'm going out, in my mind was, I'm going out in a blaze of glory. And so, so it brought me down this really dark place, and drugs did come back in, but not, like I said, it wasn't like an everyday thing for the most part. Alcohol and weed were always a constant, but as far as, crystal, or I could only handle so much before my mind was just, I was losing my mind, and I'm ready to, like, hiding in the bushes with a knife, waiting to kill somebody. And I would get like that. But when I'd sober up, I'd recognize it. I go, oh man, I need to take a break. I'm losing it. And so, it was, my new identity was in this tough guy. So here I am, and I'm going, all right, who's the toughest guy I know? My dad. My dad's the toughest guy I know. So I modeled myself after him. And I'm going, I want to be like that. And I want to have that respect. And I want to have that street cred. And I want people to be afraid of me. And those things happened. Like I said, I wasn't the toughest guy, but I was willing to go to that point, and a lot of people aren't. And so it was a really bad trickle-down effect in my life. And I brought a lot of people with me in this. I had all this group of guys, and we all had this mindset. And here, you asked about being a leader, and here I'm a leader. And I got these guys, and I'm like, no, this is how we act. This is how we do things. And I'm basically, without knowing it, I'm training guys to be monsters. And so, yeah, this new identity kind of took a course of its own, and it consumed me, and it was who I was. I mean, I got in fights everywhere I went, everywhere. You name it. I've been kicked out of bars, concerts, off the boat, where, like, anywhere you take me, there was drama. And that's just, oh man, it's so sickening not to be able to go somewhere without a fight. I got to the point where I wouldn't want to go places where there was a lot of people because of the potential for disaster, the potential that somebody would say something stupid. Well, I'm not going around that big party of people because there's always an idiot in a big party, and that's going to cause a problem. And then I'm going to have to hit somebody, and then we're going to have to get out of here quick before the cops come. And it was a lifestyle that kind of took over and took on its own identity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so part of what we're seeing again is that even though your life kind of went down this really dark path, there were gifts that God had placed in you, but they were being used in a wrong, in a dark and an evil manner. And so here God had placed in you this gift as a leader, but you're using it now to recruit other people to be part of this group, and you're teaching them, which you also have a gift of teaching, and you're teaching them how to be better criminals or better gang members. And so what were some of the things that particular group liked about you?
So, well, when you have a group like that, they want guys who are about it. And so they liked the fact that I was fearless in that manner. Like, I was really quick to react. And they liked, and I carried myself well. And so they liked the fact that I was willing to go the distance. And so that's what you need out of a leader anyway, right? So anybody who's going to lead anything, no matter what it is you're leading, you have to be about that life. You have to be able to go the distance in that life, no matter what the consequences are. And I was willing to do that. I wasn't worried about going to prison. I wasn't worried about dying. I wasn't tripping on that. Those things were a byproduct of the life I was living. I wasn't stupid. I've never been stupid to the fact where I didn't know where what I was doing was leading me. Mm-hmm. So I remember after, I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit and I'll come back, but after I stopped all that stuff, there was a guy who I had brought to this big party that I was trying to recruit this guy. And I brought him to this big party, and later on he told me, he goes, "I'll never forget what you told me at that party." And I go, "Well, what did I tell you?" And he goes, "Well, I asked you where you seen yourself in 5 years." And I go, "Well, what did I say?" And he goes, "You said you'd either be dead or in prison for life." So I wasn't fooling myself. I knew where my actions were taking me. And so guys were drawn to that. It's the weirdest thing. You wouldn't think that you would want to follow a guy who's on his way to death or prison. But something about that, with the conviction I had for it, people were drawn to it. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that was.
Did you have a nickname or anything that you were known by? And that's only if you're comfortable in sharing that. Yeah, no, I'm comfortable in sharing that. So my nickname was Bammer. I have it tattooed here on the inside of my arm. And that was the nickname given to me because I was so quick to blow up. Like, I was just a hothead. I had a short fuse. I'd never been about pushing people. Like, when getting into an altercation, never push. I just swing. And that's just how I was. And it would take an instant of somebody saying something wrong, and here I am flying over the couch, punching somebody while they're driving, like on the freeway. Like, who does that? But that's who I was. That was the attitude I had, was I didn't care. And so I had this nickname Bammer, and it was because I exploded. It wasn't because I was some strong, tough guy and all that. It was just because I was really ignitable. The second something happened, I was the first one to act. And so, yeah, that was kind of my identity at the time. So I remember when we invited you to share your testimony at one of our meetings back a couple years ago, you told a story that just was very memorable to me. At this point, you're trying really hard to mock God and make fun of the idea of Jesus or the Bible. And again, just if you're comfortable, would you be willing to share that story about what you did that night?
Yeah. So during this whole time, actually, I would go around and I would talk really bad about Christians, about Christianity, about the Bible. I would make fun of it constantly. I'd constantly talk about baby Jesus. I would constantly talk about Mother Mary. I would say horrendous things about God, about Jesus. Like, I was like verbally attacking him at all times. If somebody was a Christian in our group, and some of my friends, that my close friends did believe in God, they just knew to stay away from me and not talk to me about it. Because if I found out you were a Christian, it was going to be a bad day. Because I was going to just torture you about what you believe. And I knew a little tiny bit about the Bible, but like I knew the stories and stuff. And so I was able to bring up some things and just twist the crap out of them and really just get on people. I was even to the point where I would light Bibles on fire. I remember rolling joints with the pages. I remember actually lighting Bibles on fire. I remember being at a party one time and they had this plastic Jesus on a cross. And I just want to stop right here for a second. I'm not proud of these things. I don't say these because I'm boasting. I'm not telling this story because I'm proud of this, because I'm actually really ashamed of that. But Jesus took that shame to the cross. So I can tell it with confidence now, but I don't ever want you to think that I'm thinking I was so cool for doing this, because I wasn't. But at the time, I didn't know any better. The time I was lost, I was an enemy of God, and I didn't know him. And so I would light these things on fire with this heart that felt like God hated me. And so I wanted to hate him back with just like everything else I did. I had to do it to the maximum, right? Both feet in. There's no letting off the gas. We're pedal to the metal all the way wherever we go. And it was the same with this. So I remember this plastic Jesus on a cross. It was blue. And I remember lighting on fire at this party, and you would have thought lightning hit somebody, because people were running. Oh, we're going to die. Just lighting Jesus on fire. And it's kind of funny. I laugh just because of what an idiot I was. But you know, I was so intentional about trying to disturb God. I remember I had this idea, and I don't know if I shared this with you, Regina, but I had this idea when I was younger that I was going to make these contracts. And these contracts were going to be giving your life to the devil. And I was going to go give them to homeless people and give them $5 to sign it. That was this is how sick I was inside. My mind said, I'm going to make out these contracts of people giving their lives to Satan, and I'm going to bring them out. I'm going to go find all the homeless people I can, and I'm going to give them each $5 to sign, and see how many signatures I can get of people signing their life. I never did it. Thank God. I never did it. But those were the schemes going on inside of my mind. So there was when I say there was a hatred for God, there was a deep hatred for God. There was a with that feeling that I wasn't going to be good enough. If I wasn't going to be good enough, I was going to be as bad as I could be. So that's kind of where that went. So yeah, lighting Bibles on fire, talking bad about God, all of these horrendous things that I had said, and I would say them to everybody, and I would torture people about it. So yeah.
And so at this point, then, we're going to move into talking about what God starts to do in your life to bring about a change and to show you that he's real and that he loves you, and that no matter how far down the road you've gone, no matter how dark your world has become, he's there and he's waiting for you. And so we're going to go ahead and end this part 1 before now with Bill caught up in pride and violence and addiction and an absolute hatred for the God that's trying so hard to save him.